When was the last time we hung out? It was it the award ceremony at
At the
Balmoral
awards,
that time
World Whiskey Awards, yeah. So then,
when we
yeah,
did the little interview when I was doing all my YouTube stuff.
yeah. Your mum and dad came in to the boutique later on. Literally a year later, they're like, "Oh yeah, I know you from Mitch's video."
Yeah. That's funny, man. That's funny. It's the only people that actually watch the video.
And they're also the
Exactly.
only people that listen to this podcast. So
No, that's not true. That's not
an
true.
audience of two. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Not Another Whiskey Podcast. I am your host, Nicholas Polacki, joined as always by Captain of the ship, the man that some say can speed up the maturation of a cask of whiskey just by intensely staring at it, Mr. Mitch Bouchard. Mitch, how you doing, mate?
Good, man. You. That's a true story, by the way. I'd like to put that out there as fact. Whenever I go around to distilleries, they thank me for aging their casks by 10 years after I've left.
Just because of your icy glare? Or because of your warm charm? Who knows? Fantastic.
Oh, good, mate. Oh, good. So amazing to be joined this afternoon by the managing director of one of the finest distilleries in the land. Fantastic journey in a very relatively short period of time, I'd say, as far as whiskey years go anyway. So everyone, please welcome to the show the managing director of Glenturret, Mr John Laurie. John, how are you, mate? Great
Very
to have
well,
you here,
guys. Thanks very much for having me, and especially before you got on Brendan McCarran's Dentist. Honestly, after I saw Brendan McCarran episode 3 coming on, I thought, that's me. I'm out. There was no way I'm getting on this. This is the Brendan McCarran show.
He has actually got shares in the podcast now.
I believe that. I mean, fair play. Super funny guy. But no, absolutely delighted. Long time listener, first time participant. Delighted to be here.
Always like match of the day calling in there, isn't it? Like that. So let me just tell you about the back defence that's been going on today, mate, right? This is when we need to shake up and let me tell you why.
All I've got to say about this is
exactly. And then it's exactly that. Well, John, let's dive right in. We recently met up in New York City and we got to sit next to each other for a 16-course whiskey dinner. Is that what it actually takes these days to tolerate sitting with me for a night out?
Do you know what? I was heading across to New York for Glenturret. Very rare for me to be away from the distillery, as Mitch knows. But I was heading across to New York for this event, and I think it was the Brendan McCarran episode 3 that came on, and I thought, do you know what? Nick always complains about not getting any drams. I'm in New York with drams in my bag. I'm going to reach out.
You're a legend.
Totally worked out. You just happened to some free time at the same time I was there. And it was just going to be us catching up for drams, but then I also remembered that the Wolf Dinner was on. And it's all about cancer saving or support organisation that's run across there. And it's an incredible dinner. But yeah, 16 whiskies that you go through. So we killed 2 birds with 1 stone. We got to catch up, have some drams, and we also get to support the Wolf Foundation.
And then after that, we still got to go out. Like after 16 whiskies, we're like, that was a good warm up. Let's go out and drink.
I think sensibly, the thing was going on to Carnegie Club for whiskies and cigars after that. And I think you sensibly suggested, let's maybe just have an altar party. So we took Richard Urquhart and Kirstine from Gordon MacPhail, and we started their own little party.
Yeah, they're fantastic people. Actually, that was a great little foursome that went out for the night. That was a great little group, and
they are good company.
Yeah, Kirstine and Richard are really, really funny, and like we ended up in a, believe it or not, Mitch, we ended up in a bar in the lower part of Manhattan singing show tunes with all the off-Broadway cast members of 42nd Street.
I love the way John went, oh, Nicholas had a really down to earth, sensible suggestion, and now it's turned into you guys are singing Broadway.
To be fair,
fuck knows when in the morning.
To be fair, I took them to one of my favorite. There's a bar called Mustang Harry's right next to Penn Station, which is usually where I because it's right next to the station when I'm taking off. If I'm going in and out of the city, I'll just take the train in and out. So I know those guys well, and we went there and had a few drams, and actually they carry quite a few whiskies. Like it's an interesting spot. You walk in and but you think it's, like an Irish sports bar kind of thing, but what a whiskey selection they've got. So, going there, I had a few Shibuis, and we ended up having a few whiskies from Gordon and MacPhail as well. I think Richard pulled a few of his drams out.
Well, exactly. I was loving that. So you went away, got some Shibuis. Hey guys, we've got these, try these. So we got Richard Urquhart, who's the master at one-upmanship. So I'm going to go and I'm going to get some Gordon MacPhail and I'm going to bring them back. Oh, really? I'll get this. I was like, okay, bring on, guys. I'll just sit here and be
after 16 whiskies, that's what we needed. More whiskey.
So I was going to say, so it turned into 36 whiskies by the end of the night.
Exactly. And then we end up in is it Marie's Crisis Cafe, drinking bottles of Stella, cash only, singing show tunes.
Right, John, let's get back into kind of what's been going on here. I think, when we first met, it was just after lockdown. I luckily enough went to Glenturret and interviewed you for that lockdown time. I was doing these kind of crazy whiskey videos, and that was kind of great fun doing that. And I really got to know you a little bit from that. But some people listening might not know your name, know a little bit about Glenturret. So let's rewind a little bit, tell everyone about your history, how you got into all this.
Okay, so if I start with me personally and then to cover Glenturret, because you're totally right, Glenturret, even in the industry, was quite an unknown name at one point recently. So my career trajectory, left school, became a fitness instructor, got up to large health clubs, fell in love with whiskey in my mid-20s, couldn't really transition from health clubs into whiskey at that time, so I got my MBA at Edinburgh University. Should have gone into whiskey when I graduated then, did make a couple of conversations. Was enticed to set up my own business in fitness, which I did, so franchises and that. I exited that, selling out to my business partner. I then bought 2 cafes, a restaurant and a corporate catering company. I merged them and gave them the same brand name, and then really didn't love catering at that time. So sold that business to a couple who really did, and that was great to see that business that I put together go on and flourish into people that were really passionate about it. And my wife said 2 things: 1, go and get a real job, and B, get a job in a whiskey, which is what you've always wanted to do. So I got the job at the Famous Grouse Experience as the general manager of that, which also came with this little side part of that, which would be the brand manager of the Glenturret single malt, because the Glenturret single malt was a part of the blend in the Famous Grouse, a very small part of it, but it was a part nonetheless. But more importantly, it was the only Perthshire distillery that Edrington still owned. And therefore, when they moved to Glasgow, it was really important that they had that Famous Grouse identity in Perthshire, where Matthew Gloag was. So about 2002, that all started. A gentleman called Ken Greer, who we all know, was decided at the time what the Famous Grouse really needs is a brand home, a spiritual home. And at that time, Famous Grouse was a power brand. It was a significant revenue generator for Edrington. Blends were still really, really strong at that time. The social club scene in Scotland in particular, really common to have a half lager and a half a best and a low flyer, a wee Famous Grouse. So that made a lot of sense to that team at that time. Covering up a really small malt distillery, and malts were really probably not yet at the start of their massive resurgence, but probably showing signs of that then. That's what they did. And since 2002 until 2019, the Glenturret Distillery was the Famous Grouse Experience. And therefore, as single malts were becoming significantly popular and to where they are now, you could be forgiven from inside or outside the industry, consumer or industry part of the industry, to not really know much about the Glenturret single malt distillery, even though I'd been making single malt since we now know 1763.
The longest is that. What's your claim to fame? It's the longest, not the oldest distillery, but it's the longest running distillery. Is that correct?
So no, it's Scotland's oldest working distillery. It had a gap from the late 20s to the early 50s. There was whiskey maturing in the warehouse, but some of the plant had started to be taken out of that, and some of the buildings were used for agricultural storage for that short period of time in the middle. Yep. So what we're basically saying is that we know that site was making alcohol under the Thuret distillery name in 1763. We know it is longer than that because the rental document we found has said that the Thuret distillery was allowed to not pay rent because it had been a while since it had made spirit. So we knew it had been producing earlier than that, but we can't find any documentation to support that. So we say since 1763, And there is that gap in the middle, but we're continually working today on the same site, in the same premises, with the same buildings.
Very cool. One of the things we were looking at, obviously, the lineup of whiskies that you guys produce is incredible, and having that older age stock profile is obviously as well a little bit of a blessing, right? So we've seen some of these older whiskies that you guys have been putting out, and I'll get to one of them specifically a little bit later. But do you want to talk a little bit about some of the whiskies you've got in the market, some of the more accessible ones, the ones that if you could tell people this is a whiskey you should go and buy from Glenturret, what would you recommend, and so that people can go out and get a taste of this amazing whiskey?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's super important for us when we re-entered the market. It never disappeared. It was still, there was 2,000 cases a year under a Glenturret name going in single malt. Each of those products, there was 3 SKUs at £47 each. One was called Sherry Edition, one was called Triplewood, and one was called Peated Edition. And they were very standard non-age statements and very standard looking bottles. We went on this massive refurbishment, repositioning, rebranding. We brought in Bob Dogarnell, our master whiskey maker, across to really take a creative look at our spirit quality. One of the things that was really important to us is that the consumer who had been part of the Glenturret prior to acquisition didn't feel that they were no longer welcome in our consumer set afterwards. So we still call one of our SKUs Triplewood. It started at £47 afterwards, and it's grown a little bit since then. It's about £55 now, but still not really ramping up the price points. It's an accessible dram. It's still made by Bob Dogarnell. It's still produced in the same glass bottle that our really expensive products come in. So you get the same weight of bottle, same standard, same label, same whiskey maker, but at a price point that you could say, actually, do you know what? I'm going to a barbecue today. I'll grab a bottle of Triplewood. I'll drink it with mates. It's really smooth, really easy going. It's got, those real traditional bourbony notes, American oak notes. There's toffees and caramels and vanillas and all the sweet stuff that you expect from that. IWC voted it 99 points out of 100 last year. Forbes then picked it up and said, can the best whiskey in the world really only cost $55? Because at the time, there was no other single malts scoring 99 out of 100. And we were only $55 in America. So that for me was amazing. To be able to send that message, say, at $55, you can drink what was voted, the best single malt submitted for competition at IWC, the biggest awards arguably around. So that was really important, that our entry level was banging. And then as you go up through the range from that, you get confidence from that. So we then have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old peat smoke in our range. 7-year-olds pretty much the same price as Triplewood. 10-year-olds incrementally different, just a slight difference, few pounds difference. Peat smoke is a really interesting addition to Glenturret. We, in the early 2000s, or so late 90s, early 2000s, Edrington decided that we would be the peat constituent in Smoky Black Famous Grouse. So they put in a split faints tank. So we can actually switch between peated and unpeated production really quickly. So when we go from peated run to an unpeated run, we don't have the first batch of our unpeated having a little bit of smoke through it because we've used the faints from the last batch. We can actually keep the smoky faints completely separate until we go into the next peated run. So 25% of the stocks at acquisition were smoky when we were bought over, and we brought in 7 and 10. Then we've got 12-year-old, all European oak sherry cask, 15-year-old, again, European oak sherry cask. They're really Bob Dogarnell's signature styles. 15-year-old this year is banging. Then we jump between 15 and 25, which is a really important point to bring up. 25-year-old and then 30-year-old we call extremely scarce. So there's 210 bottles global in 25-year-old, and there are this year 500 bottles in 30-year-old global. The gap between 15 and 25 is something I get asked quite often, and that's because as a really small bespoke distillery, we don't have a lot of casks. So we can't down age stock from a bit older and to get that commercially interesting 18-year-old product or 20-year-old product that would really plug the gap there in our ladder. And what we're not prepared to do is put something out that we're not proud of. So we'd rather have that big 15 to 25-year-old gap than put something in there that A, we're not proud of, or B, puts our stock model under severe pressure.
Yeah, that's clever. So for those that don't know, like Bob Dogarnell was obviously master blender at Macallan for many, many years. So those kind of older age, the 12, the 15, that's kind of his sweet spot, because he obviously championed that, not just for the sherry contingency side of Macallan, but also the fine oak, which he would have been a part of kind of creating and rolling out for them. So like, obviously, I mean, arguably one of the best whiskey makers in the world is now at the front of your brand, which is incredible. I was just thinking about something that you were telling your kind of story and your journey into whiskey here, John. You started obviously in the gym and fitness world, and you couldn't find a way to create gym and fitness and collide with whiskey and just have it all under one roof.
You're forgetting about the bit in the middle. I went from fitness to food to alcohol. So if I keep on that trajectory, it's drugs next. So that's either a downward spiral or an upward spiral, depending on what mood you're in.
John, I had to tell you this true story. So that my gym right now it's in a headquarters building here in New Jersey, and there's a massive movie theater inside it as well. So every time you go in and out of my gym, it's just the smell of buttered popcorn fills the air, which is the equivalency of trying to have an AA meeting at the back room of a pub. So like, always makes me chuckle. So when you were saying that you were part of the fitness world before you went into whiskey, I was like, that makes sense now.
100%. 100%. Yeah. It's all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it's such an interesting transition, man. I remember one of the things that you talked to me about as well when we went to the distillery, and I think this is a fascinating story. Obviously, with your experience at Famous Grouse when you went there, and then transitioning to what is now Glenturret, I mean, I don't think you will think bad of me for saying this, but when we go back to what the Famous Grouse experience was, it was fantastic, but it was very much, I remember the big screen and you were kind of flying over Scotland like you were a grouse. And I always remember seeing a lot of coach parties rock up there. There's a lot of coaches, a lot of tourists coming along. That's a very different experience now at Glenturret, right? And you talked to me a little bit about the transition and how that all happened, which I thought was fascinating, because when Edrington put the cell or the distillery on the market, they had many, many offers for this, but they were really interested in what Lalique wanted to do, who eventually bought it, along with I'm blanking on the other owner's name now. But when they presented those plans to you guys, it was something that wasn't just for the brand, it was also this whole experience at the distillery, right? Which they've done amazingly well. I mean, you guys are now the only distillery to have a Michelin Star. The restaurant is absolutely stunning. I've been lucky enough to eat there a few times. The tour for free is absolutely fantastic.
All right, Mitch, for free. Do you manage to grift your way into a free meal?
No, I paid. Actually, someone else paid.
Someone else paid. So, yeah. Okay, yeah. You paid and then billed someone back. Yeah, got it.
but John, I've probably totally butchered that story. Can you kind of bring that to life a little bit for everyone?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So Famous Grouse experience was massively ahead of its time. When you think about the Johnny Walker experience in Prince Street now, that footprint really started with Famous Grouse experience. It had audiovisual, it won a BAFTA for that audiovisual at the time. Wow. And it brought, in its heyday, 250,000 people to a whiskey distillery in Scotland. Absolutely incredible for its day. It had run its course a little bit, and the model of consumer that we were getting through the Famous Grouse when I arrived was very coach party orientated. Now, coach parties as a business model was declining on its own anyway. The concept of putting a lot of people onto a bus together and then busting them around Scotland with different interests and different beliefs was going to become difficult. And then COVID really made that difficult, because the age profile of the people that were going on these big book coach trips was obviously primed for that. So what happened is these coaches would arrive at Glenturret because that's where they were stopping. Everyone got off, and then off the 50 people that got off that coach, 5 or 6 would go on tour. The rest of them weren't actually interested in whiskey. That's just where the bus stopped, and therefore that's where they got off. They would go and sit up in the cafe and have a potty tea and a scone between two of them, or not buy anything at all and just sit and read the paper. And then the bus would be ready to go again. They'd all leave site and go off. So those visitor numbers looked incredible, but what was it actually achieving? Were people actually becoming interested in whiskey, activated in the brand? Really, not really. When the acquisition happened, Lalique Group and Hanjog Vies is the two 50-50 owners of Glenturret now. They had their eyes set on something different, something that Scotland didn't currently have, but was really quite prevalent in the wine industry. So if you go through Napa Valley, you can't stop at a vineyard without them having a great restaurant that celebrates the terroir. They welcome you in, they open some bottles up, you feel really welcome, you have that warm, positive experience, and you probably lock onto that brand as you leave thereafter. So they wanted to replicate that in Scotland, and therefore the Michelin Star restaurant, Glenturret League restaurant, got its star in 7 months. Took a lot of energy, time, and investment to make that happen, but we're incredibly proud of it. We will do about 50,000 visits this year, so much less people visiting the distillery. But every single person that visits a distillery either goes on tour through our distillery or go to the restaurant where we celebrate the terroir of our area and discuss that. We never serve whiskey with our meal. We never have a paired this whiskey with this food course. I believe strongly that whiskey has its place. And if we try to shoehorn whiskey into a place that it doesn't belong, then we're just missing the trick. Actually, what's nothing better in the restaurant than going there, having a great meal with great friends, enjoying a really nice bottle of wine, and then at the end of the meal, sitting in the bar and thinking, you know what, I'm in an old distillery in the Highlands of Scotland. When else am I going to try my first whiskey? But now, let me give that. And if you still don't like whiskey after that, I mean, I don't believe that's true, but if you didn't, then when you're next to New York buying Uncle Joe's birthday present and you're in a store, you're like, oh, there's that place we had that great meal. It builds the story about the brand. So we do a lot more for Crieff now with the 50,000 people than we ever did with the 250,000 people, because these 50,000 will get a local B&B. They'll stay overnight. They'll eat in the restaurant. They'll then go for coffee in the morning. They'll visit the co-op on their way home. Everything in the town is better because of the new model.
That's brilliant.
And I think what's fascinating as well, and you touched on it there, you said you never pair whiskey with the dinners. And what blew me away when I went in, and this is very much a testament to Colin Hart, who manages the place, who I know you work very closely with, and all the team there, which are absolutely fantastic. But the bar is actually a proper whiskey bar. You guys stock other brands. It's just not just Glenturret behind there. And, like you said already, you have an amazing selection of wines. I've been down to your wine cellar, and it's incredible. So you guys are really offering the whole package. Your chef, unbelievable chef as well. And I know you guys, right at the start, I came along and chatted with the staff before you guys opened, and the preparations you guys put in place for opening this restaurant were unbelievable. And a testament to you guys and the team there on getting your Michelin star in 7 months. That's just insane. I imagine there's a little bit of jealousy from maybe other distilleries around about just now.
Yeah. I think thanks for calling it Colin there. I just want to spend a couple of seconds on him. He is the oil that makes the machine move. He's one of those guys who doesn't take credit, doesn't shout out, doesn't put his hand up. Things just happen, and you're like, oh, I don't know how those chairs got there, or I don't know actually how those umbrellas just arrived at the door when it's raining outside me because I'm private clients. It's Colin. Colin just makes it all work. So he was a great piece of recruitment. He drives up from Edinburgh every day to Crieff. He was desperate to get into the industry. He had made a lot of friends in the bar sector, including yourself, Mitch, when he worked in Edinburgh. And really, like our industry does, it just draws people to it. And he was like, I'll take that job if it gets me in there. Having other whiskies in the bar is something that really comes from our philosophy. We try to be really honest. We try to be really transparent. We think there are enough consumers in the world for all of us. We don't have to compete against each other. So let's celebrate the category rather than say, oh, that's a Glenturret bar. And I know that some of the other distilleries that are really jealous about us having a hospitality offering at this level that is globally recognized, they won't do that because they just can't get past that open-armed piece. Why not embrace everything? Why not have? We've got Woven, we've got Isla Rassi. I love Isla Rassi. We've got Ardnamurchan, Nick Nain. We've got really old bottles from Balvenie. We've got bottles of Macallan that we've bought from the auctions, and just to have a really eclectic collection. Because at the start, I thought, if we're going to have other whiskies on our bar, then what brings them all together? And we thought, well, if a whiskey company was to have a whiskey bar, then they're not just going to have the largest selection or the most expensive selection. They're going to have things that have stories and have tales to tell.
So
It's very
I've
cool.
got a question about that, John. I've always been wondering about this. To get a Michelin star, do you have to have a certain amount of whiskies and spirit offering behind the bar? So, the way I'm thinking is what you just said is other distilleries don't want to put up competitor brands there, right? So that might limit their ability to put themselves in the same position as you guys.
Sadly not. Michelin don't recognise spirits at all, as far as I'm concerned. The first
It's
thing
only food.
they really look at is wine. Wine is an incredibly important part of that that assessment. I would love to see Michelin taking spirits more seriously, especially when they are consumed in the right way at the right time, with the right thought process behind the cocktail or the neat serve. Or I think there are a lot of people that need to take spirits a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
But at the moment, that wouldn't be a barrier to them getting a star. Would be them putting other brands on their bar.
You know what the thing is though with that, John? Like, I think this is something that I champion as well, specifically within Japanese whiskey as well. A lot of the brands only want to speak about themselves because that's the way that it's the mentality, specifically in other parts of the world. But that's a misunderstanding of the whiskey consumer. The whiskey drinker doesn't just drink one whiskey. They don't just drink one style. They don't, like, they've got a moment. And like you said, you've created the dining experience, the opportunity to drink some killer wines, and then they have a moment to go into a whiskey bar and have a choice. And that choice varies depending on the whole week that they've had before they've even set foot in your property. So if you've limited that choice, then all you've done is potentially robbed yourself of an opportunity to sell them another whiskey, where they can come into your space and be like, well, wait a minute here, I don't really feel like this. I'd like something super peated, or, I'm not going to get to do Isla in this visit, but these guys have an Isla whiskey that I've never seen before. Or, I'm not going to be able to get up to Balvenie in this visit, but they've got a killer old Balvenie that I've never seen before. Like, that in itself shows a wider understanding for the whiskey drinker than it does about anything. And I think credit to you. I can't wait to go over and have Mitch buy me dinner. So that's something to look forward to, right? And then bill somebody back for it. So, actually, speaking of amazing drams, and I did want to go into this, you were very, very kind, and we touched on this at the start. You did bring me a whiskey, a very, very rare whiskey. So you brought me a sample of Glenturret 8 Decades by the Jim's Turret. And because I never get things like this, I wanted to drink it in front of Mitch with a big fuck you while I'm doing it. So
yes,
good for you, Nicholas. Good for you.
I was hoping that you might be able to walk me and our listeners through this amazing dram.
So absolutely, James Turrell is a really popular American artist in the art world, and I hadn't really appreciated how big a deal he is until I was introduced to him, and had a great conversation with James Turrell on Zoom calls. His dad was a whiskey drinker. He has really fond memories of his dad drinking whiskey when he was growing up, and just everything, the smell and the social occasions that smell's associated with. So really, really quite reassuring to have that conversation with this guy in Arizona, who's coming up for his 80th birthday. He's well known, wants us to do something special with him, and actually, the genesis of all that came back from his dad drinking whiskey when he was growing up, and like so many of our stories are like that. So anyway, James, his art is space and light. So he created a decanter that really refracts light and uses really, really hard colors to achieve in crystal. Lalique created this really special decanter to celebrate his 80th birthday. We took 8 different casks, each cask representing a decade in his life. So AYS of this is about 30 years old, but it's from 8 different casks, each represent a decade in his life. Bob spent some time with James, got to know that. Interestingly, because James's dad was Scottish and he grew up there, when we got in the Zoom call and we're tasting whiskies with James, and Bob and I started speaking a bit faster and faster and faster, James's assistants had no idea what we were talking about, and James had to translate for his assistants what we were saying, because our Scottish accents were getting harder to understand and we were speaking so much faster. So this was we then had to create a cabinet to go with that. We knew that most of the consumers here were probably going to celebrate James's art. So whiskey here, we're not selling the world's most expensive 30-year-old whiskey in this, because it's an incredibly expensive product. I'll come on to that. we're selling a piece of art where the whiskey is the medium that's been part of that. And I was really cautious in terms of when it came to the press releases and the places that we spoke about it, to make sure that it was an art-focused piece, and whiskey people will absolutely be interested in this. But it's £80,000 per bottle. There's only 80 bottles made. It's the hardest crystal decanter Lalique have ever had to make, with the rarest of colours, and a complex 8-cask blend that Bob's put together. That we only had 2 bottles of tasting stock after that. So we made the 8 decanters plus a couple of artist proofs that will go to auction, and 2 bottles for sampling stock, which we broke into small samples, and you have one of them in your hand.
So on that note, actually, I'll start by apologising. I said James Turret instead of James Tyrrell at the start, because I was mixing my words over Glenturret and Tyrrell. So sorry about that, James. Mitch, what are you getting in the nose here? Oh, that's right.
Very funny.
Remind me of the price point again. Mitch, walk me through this tasting. Oh, that's right. Okay. So, John, this is an absolute treat. Thank you very much. Obviously, Mitch and I are spoiled. We are spoiled by brands that we've worked with over the years. We're spoiled by the brand sponsors of Not Another Whiskey Podcast that send us nice little samples and things. And for you to kindly bring me a little drop of this very, very rare whiskey. This is what I love about where we are. Sometimes you get these. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to taste this. Yeah. And it's still morning, so this is my breakfast dram. Where I am in New York right now is only 11:37. So can you walk me through the whiskey and talk me through some of that?
Yeah, so it's got a little bit of complexity there because of the way that Bob was trying to choose different casks to represent different parts of James's life. You've got casks in there that represent vibrancy and energy for the younger part. So some notable casks in there. We've got some Glenturret. It's 33 years now, and it's in a 100-year-old Newport port pipe. So those are my favourite flavours. Yeah. Port finishes, port maturation whiskies are just my absolute favourite. I get, in particular, when I'm having it, and I don't have one in front of me now because we try and keep it.
It's rare.
Yeah, it is rare. But I get, in particular, walnuts, some almond, so a really nuttiness coming through on the James Tyrrell, which is quite different from other Glenturrets. Yep. Ginger, and what is most notable is the mouthfeel. I think the mouthfeel is not as it doesn't have the depth that you'd get in a Glenturret 30-year-old or a 35-year-old because of that vibrancy that Bob's particularly picked out. It's got a youthfulness to it.
That's wonderful. Would you recommend this with Diet Dr. Pepper or Iron Brew?
Iron Brew or American Fanta.
American Fanta, yeah. You need that like bright orange, really to lift those citrus notes.
More chemical notes, the better.
This is incredible. Thank you very much. It really is a treat. Thanks for bringing me a wee drama of it, Mitch. I'm sorry. I'm not even joking because I'm not a complete piece of garbage. I've saved you some. So
thanks, pal.
I'll keep it for you. That's next time I'm over, or next time you're back here, we'll share a lot. This is a cracker. So, and you're right. It's 30 years young almost. It has got this little pop of like, it's really nice. Like you get those fudgy notes, definitely with that kind of marzipan, almond paste notes there, the walnut and kind of the baking spices with the kind of fudgy notes as well. It's really, really clever. It's a really like a journalistic whiskey. Like it's not one dimensional. There's a lot going on, and it's all beautifully balanced. Good job. I mean, it's James Bob Organo, so yeah, nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. He knows what he's doing. James Tyrrell as well bought a crater in Arizona, and he is developing that into his life legacy piece. He will leave that for the world once he's gone, and it's all about how light interplays with everything around about that crater. It's called Rodin Crater, and it's supported by Rodin Crater Foundation, a charitable foundation in America. And we are donating the artist proof bottle, completely filled, along with the original sketches that James did, hand signed by him. We are donating them in. They're going to get auctioned in New York on the 9th of December, I believe. And all the proceeds, 100% of the primer price, will go to Rodin Crater Foundation.
Mitch and I are leaving our careers. That's the crater that we're leaving for the world, right, Mitch?
Your body of work. I leave my body of work for Not Another Whiskey Podcast.
My body of work. And also with you. Here's something, John, that I wanted to touch a little bit. It's a bit of a hot topic. which is whiskey cask investment. We've spoken about it on the podcast quite a few times. It's relatively unregulated world, which has almost become a little bit of a Ponzi scheme today with some bad actors. But you and I had this chat specifically about Whiskey Cask Association, and we get chatting about this in New York. So these guys kind of pitched you to be coming on board to help support their plans, but they actually pitched you with the fact that and I would like you to tell the story if it's okay with you, and we can cut this out if it's not okay with you, but the SWA, they basically said that the SWA were supporting their plans. And this was one of the reasons that yourself, and we can only assume a few others, signed up to support the process of Whiskey Cask Association's formation. I'd love you to walk us through a little bit about it. And, you know, a few others were certainly used, I guess, I think, in this process for Whiskey Cask Association. Like, what was that journey like for you? How did they come to you, and what was the kind of outcome of it all?
So for sure, I think there is a massive need in our industry. I think we are all unified that some regulation and some governance needs to come in to cask whisky sale and resale. That being said, Glenturret, actually, we had a conversation once about potentially doing a new make spirit that we would use to support independent bottlers. I think the independent bottling part of our industry needs supported. You know, distillers need to start breaking off some casks and some liquid that they can give to independent bottlers to keep that part of the business alive, because we were ultimately built on that. You know, independent bottlers provide brilliant whiskey at affordable prices that consumers start enjoying, and then they ultimately gravitate towards the core brand. They're like, oh, I like that at £30, £35, £40. I'm actually much more comfortable going and spending £55 on Glenturret Triplewood because I've had a chance to try it with North Star, Gordon MacPhail, Douglas Lang, etc., etc. So I feel really strongly about that. Try to make that happen. However, the name that we were going to use for that got out. 24 hours later, we had 20 people selling that new make spirit on WhatsApp and into their client base.
Wait, so you hadn't even launched it?
We hadn't even filled a cask. We hadn't even completed the conversations on it, but that name got out, and I saw the WhatsApp messages saying, "I've got this. Just send me the money, and we will send you the deals. We've got it in the warehouse ready to go." We hadn't even filled it, and people were selling it, and it really hit me hard. At where we are now in the industry with these bad actors that have come in. And Scotch whisky is so unused to that, because we are collaborative, and it's kind of been built on integrity and built on everyone knows everybody, so you can't actually do the wrong thing because you get found out. So just don't be a dick. But it's now we're in a different phase, and we need that. So that happened. Being approached by CWA, really raw that yes, absolutely, I'd happily to be an advisor to the CWA about a distiller's or a brand perspective, how we can perhaps potentially find ways to support protect the consumer. And then all this is kind of kicked off, and the SWA that was mentioned, I spoke to the SWA, and they are not as involved as potentially I was led to believe. And also, I've seen my picture up promoting the Cask Whisky Association on their social channels, and I've seen Hans Offringas and a few other big names in the industry. They're all on the advisory board, but I've not seen any of the pictures of the people on the executive board. They've still kept in the background. Now, on your interview, which I thought was excellent, I really enjoyed listening to that, and I thought you boys did a great job of treading that line really, really well to get the right answers out in a really fair and balanced way. And I think hats off to the CWA. What they've done is created a lot of noise around about a situation that the real people who need to take this seriously weren't doing. So what needs to happen now is SWA needs to change its regulations to include casks in its remit and start offering some protection, some advice, and some regulation around about this part of the industry. But as for the CWA, until they fulfill the obligation they gave to both of you on this interview, which was to hold elections and change that executive panel, I don't think they are the right people for the job. So
where does this leave you then, John? Are you going to continue with them, or are you kind of out, or where?
I'm sadly not able to continue with CWA. I've seen my picture being used and my quotes being used, but not seen any of the pictures or quotes from the people who set it up being used. And it just leaves me with a feeling that they are utilizing my hard-end profile, doing the right thing, acting the right way, and they're using that, but they're not prepared to put themselves forward. And I think that was it for me. I was prepared after I heard your interview, actually, because even as an advisory board, I hadn't heard as much as you managed to get out of them on that interview. So yeah, for me, I'll I've taken advice, and I'm just going to quietly remove myself, although I'm doing a podcast and we're talking about it, but I'm going to remove myself from it. I really think they've done an amazing job at creating a noise around about an issue that I think the industry needs to take a lot more seriously, a lot more quickly than it is doing at the moment.
Yeah,
100%.
But we fundamentally, wholeheartedly agree with you that this needs to be an SWA thing. They are the independent body in whiskey. And it would be really easy for them to take a stronger look at this with the Advertising Association in the UK and say, here's the standard. And if you want to do it, it comes through us because they are the standard. It's a lot of work, but maybe that's something that the bigger brands would help contribute towards creating, some type of regulation and the people that are needed to support it. To me, it creates jobs if the right people at the SWA are looking after this. And I think that's something to bear in mind as well.
To be honest, as well, it doesn't just at the SWA's door. The brands need to take this more seriously. 100%. We are the ones that are holding those casks, and yet don't always know who owns them. I mean, that's just not good enough. And there are other financial instruments whereby there are really robust procedures and policies in place which protect that transfer of ownership and make sure that that is really crystal clear. So other industries have managed to do it. We just need to take lessons from them. The brands need to set up and take a lot more care over it. It's our brand. If Joe Bloggs in Southeast Asia gets a hold of the Glenturret cask that was sold years ago and has no contract attached to it, even if it does have a contract attached to it, they could stick that in any shape of bottle, any colour of bottle, with any kind of label, with Toes of the Cat all over the bottle, and sell it at a price point that really just doesn't look great and put the Glenturret on it. That's our brand they're playing with. Yeah. How can we not be taking that as seriously as we need to be taking it? You wouldn't get away with that if it was Porsche. You wouldn't get away with that if it was Rolex. We need to be taking that seriously because we're not talking about fakes and forgeries here. We're talking about actual genuine product.
Hopefully, if it's been made yet.
It's a great subject, right? And I think we could talk about this is a whole other episode. Yep. I'm thinking we get you back on again, John. Maybe someone from the SWA and maybe someone who is a cask broker as well. And we have a look at this from all the different angles.
Sure.
And then you can, say you've been on the show twice and getting up there with
catching up with Brendan. As long as you don't get him on in between times.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show, man, and great to catch up with you again. It's been way too long since we've seen each other, so I need to pop down to Glenturret and hang out.
Please do, mate.
Have another wee dinner down there.
Yeah, knew the ask was coming. I knew something was going to.
We're coming into awards season as well. I'm sure we'll bump into each other at some of the awards or whatever.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Absolutely. So, John, tell people out there, where can they kind of follow you online? Is it you on Instagram? Are you on? Where can people kind of track you and track the Glenturret?
Yeah, Glenturret is on at the Glenturret Whisky on Instagram. I'm Glenturret John on Instagram and theglenturret.com on the website.
John, thanks very much for coming on the show. This has been a blast. It's great to meet you, and I'm hoping we can share some drams together again in the future.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your time. Delighted to be here, and take care.
Cheers, mate.